this. So great that you've got something out there. So Maxar have got what, a rover, or is it part of the rover that's traveling on?
It's part of the rover, yeah. So NASA launched the Mars rover earlier this week, and the rover itself has a Maxar robotic arm attached to it. So we were part of the Perseverance project that was going on. So
that's cool. So whenever this thing picks up Martian like life forms and puts them into the bucket, that's you.
That's Maxar. We don't just do satellites. We do a lot of machine learning as well as robotics. So a lot of cool stuff.
See, that's the interesting thing when you work for a quote unquote proper company. Stop working for these app type businesses. Actually work for a company that builds stuff and sends things to Mars, like Aaron does. Okay, great. Anyway, we're live. So welcome everybody to Brainfood Live On Air. Amazing to have everyone on with us again. It's episode 70, bringing it to you every Friday, non-stop, despite the fact it's ridiculously hot in the UK right now and I should not be wearing a collar. Anyway, just a quick sound check as usual, folks. If you're in Crowdcast, just give me a quick comment to say, yes, Hong, I can hear you. You should be fine. We are multicasting to LinkedIn. So LinkedIn Live, for some reason, no one's watching my LinkedIn Live videos anymore. I used to be hitting like 3,000, 4,000 views every time, but now it's like gone down to like 600-700. What is going on, LinkedIn? I think I'm in LinkedIn's tar pit or something. But if you're watching on LinkedIn, just say hello. Let me know I can see you and it's live and broadcasting there. Okay. If so, we're going to continue. And I believe, oh shit, I knew I didn't do Facebook I didn't do. And now I'm done it. I need like back office support. What can I say? I need people around me to do the production side of it. I can't do the production, but I got no money either. So there's another thing. Anyway, I think we're ready to go. So that's fantastic. Welcome everybody. A quick word to our sponsors this week. This week is sponsored by our buddies at Workable. Everyone knows Workable, I hope. If you're looking for an ATS, looking to upgrade your ATS in some way, Workable are the tool for you. Really great to see, this next generation of cloud-based ATS CRM type providers come out there, because I think we've been looking around some of the legacy software for a little too long. So great to see companies like Workable really stealing some of that market share, moving ahead into the enterprise. So check out Workable, workable.com. They are a great product. Okay, on to the show. What are we talking about today, Aaron? Actually, before we dive into that, why don't you introduce yourself, Aaron, for the people who don't know you, who you are and what do you do?
So I am Aaron Matthew. I am a strategic talent sourcer over at Maxar Technologies. And our main claim to fame is we build satellites. If you've ever looked up anything on Google Maps, those are our satellites that provide the images. And then most recently this week, I don't know if you have been following the launch of the Mars rover, but the rover is actually equipped with a Maxar robotic arm. So that's been very exciting news for us this week over at our company.
Yeah, that's amazing stuff. And as we were talking about earlier, it is quite interesting to be recruiting for a business where you're just not like recruiting for a battery of software engineers. There's a lot of kinds of different people that need to come together to help build something like this. Great stuff. Well, welcome back to the show, Aaron, because you've been a firm favorite with us. In fact, I believe the show that you were on at the start of this year may still be our record registration show. I think there's 600 plus people registered for that, which we now know for webinars is actually massive, especially for a weekly runner. Because the average hit rate, I think for us is about 150, 200 or something like that, which still I think is pretty good post-COVID. But we were at 600 plus for your last appearance, I believe. So great to have you back, Aaron. We always start off by reviewing the newsletter from last week. Did you read it? And if so, what was interesting for you?
Well, I hope I read it, being that I'm a guest. So yes, I did read it. But I think the thing that fascinated me the most was the chart of 50 cognitive biases that you need to know. And so many of them, I could immediately put a real life situation to whichever one they were. But I'd say that the one that most resonated with me was the Dunning-Kruger effect, which means that the less you know, the more confident you are in what you know. And I have personally experienced that so much as a sourcer. For example, before I really got heavily involved in the sourcing community, I was working as a full cycle recruiter, but at the company, I was the sourcing person. And I just thought, oh, I'm really good at this. I think so many ways out of the box. I know this and I know that. And then I attended my first SourceCon and learned that I know absolutely nothing. I didn't even know what a Chrome extension was or a custom search engine. I didn't even know Boolean, yet I considered myself a sourcing expert. So I think that at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, you know what, Aaron, that's just great that you're willing to volunteer an example like that, because I think everyone has been there. I remember the first time I went to a conference, and this is dating myself massively, but it might have been 2009 or something. And I was by then like a very experienced recruiter. And I thought, yeah, I know how to do my job. Don't tell me how to do my job. Quite impervious to new information, actually, because I was like, yeah, I know it. Like, I've been successful this period of time. Went into this conference and I was like, mine is completely blown. Like, the entire universe opened up for me. And I realized that my knowledge was very, very limited. And we need to have that humility as we go forward. Isaac Newton, classic quote, and I'm going to misquote him here, but he said when he was being praised for what he knew, this is Isaac Newton, he said he was just a person wandering across the seashore who happens now and again to pick up a seashell that's a little bit prettier than the rest. But before me is an entire ocean that he's got no knowledge of whatsoever. That's Isaac Newton. And I think we'd better be people like Isaac Newton with that kind of humility rather than whoever Mr. Dunning-Kruger were talking about, because I think that unfortunately is the dominant type of person these days. Anyway, great infographic. Everyone should print that out, by the way. That should be a post on people's walls. Really useful. Hat tip to Ivan Harrison for sending that to me. It basically is 50 cognitive biases, like described in like a paragraph, so accessible. You can totally get it. But it might actually help you, get better at thinking, which, we could all, I'm sure, get better at. Okay, cool. What else was interesting for you, Aaron?
Definitely the two income trap. So the article basically describes how most households are surviving on two incomes these days, but the quality of life is only slightly better or relatively stagnant. And it asks a very provocative questions of, should women have just stayed at home, which obviously I wholeheartedly disagree with, but it does question as to whether people are better off with both the, husband and wife, or husband and husband, wife and wife working in a two income household. So I think that it's not necessarily about gender in this case. It's more about where has our society gone, where profits are at an all-time high but wages are stagnant. Why is our quality of life better when we're working more?
Yeah. And we're starting to ask these questions, which is fantastic. I read that as well. And it's by a lady called Letitia Vidot. And by the way, everyone should read Letitia. She is a French, she lives in the UK, but she writes in English as well as French. But she's, I think, one of the best popularizers and thinkers of feminism plus the future of work. And I think she sent a bit of a kind of a baity type of title, because she's obviously, very much keen for women to take their place in the workplace and so on. But she does ask a very pertinent question, saying women are not getting the rewards for doing so. And in fact, no one's getting the rewards for doing so. Because it just means you've got to have extra stuff that needs to be done, particularly if you have kids. Like if you have two workers, you have kids that need childcare, you then need to outsource that childcare, and that costs you as much money as you might actually one of your parents might be earning. So it kind of like is like filling the bathwater when you haven't put the plug in the sink, put a plug in the thing. It's just simply going to keep one flowing in and flowing out. So I think we're starting to ask these very important questions in society. Now is the time. I mean, if we can't ask these questions now, then when can we? So hopefully some policy, this will trickle up, I think, to policy. I hope, cross fingers. But if it doesn't, it might go elsewhere in a potentially dangerous way, I would say. Yeah, cool. Okay, one more, Aaron.
All right. So what's next for HR in the face of COVID-19? And I think that we can all agree that with such an extreme world event that has happened, the entire scope of HR has incredibly changed. Someone told me many years ago that the function of HR is to keep the company out of court, which in a lot of cases that's true, but there's so much more to it, especially now. You're seeing HR implement more wellness programs, enabling people to transition to working from home, and providing more, I guess, support to give employees a better quality of life. And a lot of companies are doing that right. And I think many have recognized that people are going to remember how a company treated their employees during COVID-19, and they're obviously going to flock to the ones that are doing it correctly. And I consider myself very fortunate that I think that Maxar Technologies is handling it quite well. And, they have provided so many additional resources to our employees, like stipends for setting up a home office and just regular check-ins with HR to see how everyone's doing, not just with their work, but in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting because we have to all of us have got to kind of challenge the things that we knew before. What is the role of HR? HR was built it's a function. It was built around the idea that people are going to be in office. We know, for instance, a lot of distributed only businesses have a very light HR function. Because there isn't you don't have to cater for things like health and safety in the office and all those other responsibilities that typically go under HR because you've got a bunch of people in the same place. That doesn't happen anymore. So very interesting set of questions. And as you say, it was very positive to see HR innovating and responding very well. There was actually, I think in the same week, maybe the week before, there was a survey conducted by, I think, Personio, who sell HR onboarding software, I believe. And they asked basically the question, hey, HR, how have you done during the pandemic? And most of the respondents felt fairly confident they did a reasonable job of it. And I think that's kind of true. I mean, I can't prove it, but it feels to me like the HR function has generally done okay. It's like we haven't, we meaning, the wider people function, I think have generally done okay, but particular credit to HR, who, oftentimes get denigrated unfairly, I think. So.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, well, let's get on with the show, Erin. Really good to get your views on the newsletter. One of the things that we did talk about sort of at the beginning of that newsletter was to say, hey, we're going to be talking about recruiting automation this week. And I'm really pleased to get you on board with this because you and I are not experts at recruitment automation. So I needed basically a partner in crime to talk about this and not feel like the dumbest person in the room. But before we bring in people like Guillaume and Adam who can help us talk through this, I wondered what your thoughts were generally on recruitment automation, or at least automating bits of the recruitment process. Have you employed any of this, and where do you see the value in it in your own work?
The value that I see in automation is being able to get a lot of quality work done in a much shorter amount of time. For me, unfortunately, I have fallen into the trap so many times of spending more time trying to automate something when I could have done it quicker manually. So I'm excited about this topic to see if, there's easier, more accessible ways for me to actually, automate things at a base level. But I think that's the trap that a lot of people get into, is they get tripped up by the actual automation process. And then they just say, screw it, I'm doing this manually. But really, our time is valuable. And I would much rather be out there, doing a lot of, deep sourcing and things like that, rather than having to worry about entering anything manually.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's lots of reasons why automation is a good idea. Efficiency, number one, is the primary concern. But the second thing is also accuracy. If you can automate, you basically get rid of manual input errors, which we're gonna do. So there's lots of deeper reasons why it should be a good idea. But you're right. If you're wrestling with something, it's so frustrating when you know there's another path, even though the path is going to take you theoretically more time. At least it's clear for you. You know how to get there, and you might default this way. Anyway, let's bring on our guests onto the show. Let's see whether they can shine a light for us on this. And by the way, I'm tempted to bring random people onto this show because I'm excited by the fact we've now got 6 people on screen that we can try, and I've never done that before. So we might just get a Royal Rumble going on here at some point. Okay, we want to bring on Guillaume Alexandre and also Adam Chambers, and let's see what they can do for us. And is that Sofia? Sofia's here. Sofia, I would have invited you on, but you said you were on holiday. But if she's on holiday, if you're obviously logging on, I might bring you on a bit later. Sofia's from Sweden. The Swedes take 3 months off on holiday, and they literally think that's just normal. So yes, Sofia. All right. So Guillaume, I've invited you, and I've also invited Adam. Oh, here he is.
Hello.
Guillaume, how are you doing?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay.
Good to see you. Guillaume, for people who don't know who you are, can you quickly just introduce yourself, who you are and what do you do?
I am, so my name is Guillaume. I'm French. I live in Geneva, Switzerland. The lake is right here. It's really hot today. And I'm a sourcer. That's what I do. So I work with internal recruiters. So I'm an external sourcer. I work with internal recruiters to find, contact, and engage very hard to find people. And I'm training also and doing lots of different things.
Fantastic. Great to see you on the show, Guillaume. And we have Adam Chambers here joining us from Canada, I believe. Adam, how are you doing, sir?
Canada? I'm in Spain at the moment.
Are you in Spain? Yeah, I always get confused as to where you're at, man.
Yeah, no, I've been in 3 countries. Before COVID, I was everywhere, but I've decided to settle here.
Now in Spain. Adam, for the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself as well to the crowd?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everybody. I'm Adam, the founder of ApplyChat. We specialize in helping recruiters source automatically pre-screened candidates from outside of job boards. So we have a big focus on using Facebook and using automation, especially to really remove the burden of having to manually go out and find people and screen them and hand that over to the robots.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm really excited to know a little bit more about how you work with some of these Facebook recipes that you referred to, because that's a mystery to me. And in terms of how do you operate and work with some of these day-to-day tools that basically with a bit of advancement, you can actually accelerate your efficiency a great deal. Guillaume, let me go to you first, though. I remember the last time we chatted, we talked about your general automation philosophy, and you said something to me which kind of stuck in my head still, which was, anything that you need to do again or do twice, you've got to try and find a way to automate, because you're just repeating your behavior. And if you could push a button and actually do that, exactly the same way, that makes sense to do. Can you give me an example of what you mean by that for the folks who are just tuning in and maybe exploring this idea for the first time?
Super simple stuff. I don't know. For example, I always tend to get the same messages from people on LinkedIn who tell me, "Hi, I'm looking for a job. Do you have something for me?" And as a sourcer, I find jobs for people, but I find people for jobs, but I don't find jobs for people. So I can't really help them. So my answer is always standard. So writing it again and again would be boring and would take me time. So in the end, I would end up giving them 2 lines or whatever. So I'm using extensions like TextBlaze or Gorgias or whatever, where I just say, I've set up a set of keys, which is like Control R for response. And then automatically there is a nice response that I took time to really saying, "Oh, thank you very much. But, as a sourcer, I can't really help you. But here's a link to my database if you really want, because for GDPR reasons, I can't get it. So please feel free to have it and have a lovely day. I'm sure let's link. So if I've got something, I'll come back to you," whatever. A big fat text that is nice and well thing. And that's automated. It's just, for me, it's Control R, and that's it. That's done. Response. And so why would I write that email 10 times a week.
Yeah. And for folks who don't understand, this is also known as the canned response, right? So in other words, if you find yourself writing the same message over and over again, which I do also, you know, when you're sending out tens of thousands of emails, you get a lot of emails back. And sometimes they're kind of, oh, where's this, Hung? And it's like, okay, I've really answered this at least 150 times. You can't be typing it out, you know, per key every time. So you have the same message, you put a shortcut in there, and it's basically 2 keys on your keyboard usually, and it will trigger a response that is a written email. You just canned it, ready to go. And that's a classic bit of automation. You know, I think that's kind of a lot of automation is actually just office efficiency, isn't it? It's not necessarily recruitment specific. It's just efficient stuff that probably an experienced office worker would already know how to do, but oftentimes it's a revelation for people in the recruitment game, you know.
Exactly. There are other things like straight in Google, if you in your Chrome, if you set it up in the back end, and literally it takes 5 minutes to do, instead of putting, when you're x-raying a website, instead of putting sitelinkedin.com/in every time, and I've got fat fingers, so I always like miss a key or whatever. If I start typing LIX, okay, this is set directly in my Chrome that it's going to start with, it's going to search directly into LinkedIn. But I can do that for GitHub, for everything, for all that. So that's also embedded directly into Chrome. You can do that.
Oh, so I see what you mean. You're basically using embedded, you're using canned Boolean searches, right?
Yeah.
If it's something you do all the time, why not just exactly, you know, create a shortcut for it? So do people understand what I mean by canned sort of messaging, by the way? If you don't, then please pipe up on the chat stream. I'd be interested to know what the general sort of fluency with some of the terminology is here. But yeah, it's like when I first found how to do this, auto text expander is something I use. It was like, whoa, absolute revelation. Because I was copying and pasting before. And that is basically full of errors. You got to retrieve the message initially. It's actually like 2 more actions than a canned message might be. And it is simply a massive time saver. You could certainly respond at scale and do things like search on scale. Okay, cool. How about you, Adam? Before we dive into the deeper technical stuff in terms of your business and also on Facebook, are there any like office-based automated stuff that you may not even think of as automation, but now you've heard Guillaume's example, you might think, actually, yeah, that's kind of automated, and that people out there may not kind of be aware of?
I guess like what just relating to Facebook, like whenever you get candidates in, you get notified. Yeah, you don't really think about it, but it's happening within their system and within their backend. On a lot of social media sites as well, they've programmed it so you don't even know that it's automated. You don't even think about it, but you're having that great experience, which is why you stay on those sites and why you use those softwares like every single day.
Go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to like show everybody today a software which we talked about on your post called Integromat.
Yes, that's right. It's and it's kind of like a Zapier style, or Zapier. Does anyone know how to pronounce that? I think it's Zapier, isn't it? I'll go with that. It's a Zapier style. Is it middleware? I'm not sure what it is, but it's basically a tool that helps you connect different apps together, right?
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I think so.
So the situation is like the people I work with, I'm 23, and most of them have an intern who's my age. And I say, what do you do all day? And it's a lot of the time it's manual data input, extremely automatable tasks, which honestly just waste people's time. And if someone's junior in an organization, they shouldn't be doing that because there's technology which can do it. I think especially in recruitment, because as an industry, it's a little bit behind everyone else in adopting technology. There's hundreds of hours out there being wasted on simple tasks, which using this site, for example, could help offload. So this is Integromat. This is a product, like I'm not affiliated with it or anything. I just use it a lot to save hours each week. And it's got like a very simple interface. And this is an example which I've created for the purpose of this, where simply someone fills in a form. This could be like an application form through your career site. It could be through a Facebook ad. It could be through any type of CRM. And essentially, this process can help automate the pre-screening part of it. So it's really simple. You just put into this site Integromat the different technologies you use, so Facebook ads and then email. And then here I've put in a condition where it says, is their answer to the experience question more than 5 years? If it is, then they're sent a priority next steps. If it isn't, they're sent normal next steps. And if it's lower than 1, then they're just sent an email saying they're not eligible. And in doing so, that helps solve the big problem where candidates like never hear back. And really, that's what people moan about. That's what gets recruiters a bad name. And it's so easy just to remove that using something like this. I don't know why a lot of people aren't doing it.
Yeah, so I mean, just for people to understand this, essentially what this does is you create a bunch of screening questions on your advert, which anybody I think would know how to do, whether it's Facebook or anything else. And using this middleware, it will sort out the responses in terms of how people have elected to make the selection. By the way, just to give you an example what that looks like, I set up a poll earlier today. That is an example of a multi-choice type of question that you might put in an advert. And what this product does is essentially create some email triggers based on those responses. And depending on the relevancy of it, you would get what appears to be a reviewed email from a human being to say, hey, that's fantastic. You've got 5 years experience. Let's take it further forward to this next point. Or it's this, that, or the other. And you'd get some sort of response rather than candidate black hole, which, by the way, I think is still default though, isn't it? If we're kind of job seeking, and we're going to do a show on job search as recruiters looking for work actually in 2 weeks time. And I think what's motivated us to do this is because I think it'll be really interesting insight for us as job seekers now in large part to see what the experience is. I assure you one of the main parts of feedback there is, look, candidate black hole is still definitely there. It's still the default experience. See an advert, apply, nothing. Whereas something like this can really plug that gap.
Yeah. So what Adam showed us was basically an algorithm.
Well, yeah.
If this, then that.
Yeah.
For lack of a better.
Yeah, like conditional logic. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and there's lots of different tools. If this, then that is one of those that can do it. Zapier is also another one that can do it. You could probably rig something up yourself to do it, as a matter of fact. But it's an example of speeding up your response in a weak point that recruiters have. And the weak point is simply a capacity issue. I mean, now actually maybe a very highly imperative time to implement something like this for candidate response, because the volume of candidates has spiked up in ridiculous fashion. I mean, to the point where it's hitting like the BBC News to say people are overwhelmed by adverts for jobs that they posted. We're talking thousands of responses where previously there were dozens. And you simply can't manually go through all of that. You have to use some sort of automated solution. What other solutions are out there, Guillaume? I mean, have you seen anything similar to this? Or, I mean, is there something you could rig up yourself, do you think, that could, perform a similar type of function?
On starting from Facebook and having this, any type of email messaging campaigns will have that type of funnels and everything. Like if the person has responded, then that happens. If they have clicked, then whatever. Adam is here all the time, and candidate.id does it perfectly also. This is also automated. So it can do, there is automation. It's hard to define even what automation is. Because when you go down to, I don't know, we're talking IFTTT just before, so if this and that. I use it to record Twitter. because I can't. It's the only way I know that can record both the tweets and the retweets on a hashtag. Okay, and it goes straight into a Google Sheet. It takes 2 seconds to set up. And so I can guarantee you that for the last 5 years, anybody that has tweeted or retweeted on any other hashtags of the conferences I go to, I've got them all. So in order to market map of people who are interested in a subject, I do it constantly on devs conferences in France, for example. I've got a backlog of 5 years. So anybody who's ever tweeted anything in the last 5 years on the DevOps main conference, I've got them on a spreadsheet. This is automation, but this is recording as well. There's lots of things you can do.
Yeah, you know what? That technique is super simple, and it's an obvious one to use. Again, it's auto-populating a spreadsheet, isn't it? If you were spending time to just harvest that, you'd be there forever monitoring it. But all this does is basically track or search tweet, and you can be location specific on Twitter, remember? So you can also do it in terms of the I think you can do date range. You can do also radius as well. So you can be quite accurate on this. And then you can basically figure out, who's talking about this terminology in this location during this time frame. It goes into a spreadsheet, and boom, there's your prospect list. You can use that for BD. Go ahead, Aaron. You're about to say something?
No, so on the location side of things, on IFTTT, you can really trigger almost a building. So unfortunately, very, very few people leave the location tag on Twitter. But if you keep it for long enough, you have the people who've tweeted in one particular bidding. So if you want to trigger a particular company again and again, you know who's been tweeting from this location. It's quite cool.
Let me zoom out a little bit on some of this, everyone. Where do you think automation needs to really, where we should be focusing on? I mean, we're talking about the recruitment funnel, recruitment activities. Like, what kind of things do we really need to get all over? We have the technology. We also understand the problem. We should just get on with automating this. I think candidate response on job application is certainly one of those, Adam. What are the ones out there? Aaron, you got any thoughts on this?
I definitely think that automation can serve a great purpose with something as simple as even Google alerts when new search results come up for, maybe a Boolean string that you use pretty frequently, so that you're not constantly, like Guillaume said, running that same string to get those one or two new candidates. So I think automation from that standpoint can be a great time saver. But I think that there still needs to be a human element with recruiting. And I think that we need to figure out where we draw the line, like what is necessary for human interaction in this situation and what can be automated.
So do you have an idea on this, Aaron? Because you're going towards a place where I want to go anyway. So where should we automate and where should not? Where should we leave it?
So like you mentioned, when we have such a high volume of applicants right now for a lot of jobs, there's certain stages of the recruitment process where, let's say that they don't get that far in the process where, they maybe only get as far as a recruiter reviewing their resume. I know specifically, I think it's ADP, that ATS has certain functionalities that can send automated messages to candidates that say, like, your application was viewed by a recruiter. You're going to go to the phone screen for this next part of it. But if it goes so far as someone comes on site for an interview, I don't think they should get an automated message. They should get a phone call from you personally, whether they get the job or not. Things like that are not supposed to be automated.
Yeah, I think, you know what, there's an element where this is energy in, energy out, I think.
I think really, as individuals, it's really important to look at what you do between 9 and 5 each day and actually write it down. So I did this a few months ago, and I realized there was so much stuff that wasn't like my optimum work and which wasn't helping me progress in my role. And that was stuff which then I went down and tried to automate. No, it wasn't like high level stuff like conversations. I think that's really important to actually speak on the phone to people. It was more like the repetitive data entry, filling out forms. That's the stuff, like, once you write it down, that you actually say, oh, I'm wasting time here. And like this needs to be taken off my plate, and it actually can be.
Absolutely.
You know what? We've lost Guillaume, but that's okay. Because you know what, Adam Gordon is here, so I'm gonna actually have to bring him on because he's been referenced already on this candidate ID. And as much as I hesitate to bring Adam on the show, as I ever do, but he's right there. So there he is. Adam,
Hi.
how are you doing?
Yeah, fine. I was actually in the middle of just typing a response to Erin on something.
I know you're involved. I thought you weren't available there, but I see you in the chat stream. So I thought, okay, let's bring Adam on, because your company was actually referenced by Guillaume earlier today about, you're doing a lot of automation, particularly with, making sure the candidate experience is optimal. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, how does it work? I understand there's also a free option you can use on the CRM as well. So I'll be interested to know a bit deeper about, where you're addressing the pain points from a candidate's point of view.
Yeah, so the free option's a CRM, and nobody needs a CRM. That's why it's free. A CRM is a completely wasted piece of technology. So what you really need is the ability to communicate with people at scale on a personalized basis, which is determined by what they clicked last, not by what you think you should be saying to them. So you can automate absolutely everything. In terms of, like, you've got the four of us are all in the same talent pipeline, and we all get completely different messages through different channels in different formats on different days of the week and times of the day based on what we've been doing previously. So rather than what the recruiter thinks we might want to talk about, so that's what we do. It's personalized. It's nurture automation, I guess, is one way of describing it. You can't nurture more humans. There's a law called Dunbar's law, which says that humans can maintain 150 relationships with other individuals using their brain alone, right? So if you can only keep in touch with 150 people and know anything about them, then that's not scalable. You know
what? I think it's actually far less than that. I really think it's far less than that. There was a study about gorillas, and I always like to study gorillas because let's go to our closest relatives, and apparently they also have a version of the Dunbar's law. In other words, they stopped like caring about certain size of the group, and the group splits because they can't manage that many relationships, and it's far smaller than 150. So I think definitely if you're in a role that causes you to actively have to address a much larger audience than is, let's say, natural, quote unquote, which recruitment, if you could talk to 1 million people, you would do that. That would be a thing that you would say, yes, I would like to do it. You definitely need tooling to help you do it. Guillaume mentioned earlier about being able to collect leads. Your product seems to be kind of designed to help develop relationships, nurture relationships after the lead is captured. Adam's product potentially can talk about, do the initial filtration and all the rest of it. So there's lots of things we can stitch together here, I think, that can help recruiters optimize their time. I want to get back to Erin's point, though, that she made about when should you not automate. And she talked about, look, when the person's turned up on site, he or she has committed time, committed energy to be there, maybe even emotional content, whatever it is. That person then needs the human touch. And I think, we're kind of, there's a law there of some type, where if they've committed X amount of energy in, you need to commit a little bit of that back. You can't just like give them a super optimized, for you it's super optimized, but for them, they're being now that risk that they're feeling that they're not being treated with respect. What are your thoughts on that, Adam? Is there a point where automation needs to back off? Adam Gordon on this. I realize there's two Adams on the call here.
Not just two Adams, there's two Celtic Adams as well.
Terrible. This is a lack of imagination by Scottish parent naming. What's going on?
He's Irish. He's not even.
That's the second time I've been called Scottish recently.
Oh dear, I do beg your pardon, Adam Chambers. Go to Gordon first.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to tell you my point, and so I'm sorry, Aaron. I was going to disagree with you on one thing, which is I was in the middle of posting when I got the invite to join. I don't think candidates care about talking to humans other than the hiring manager or team colleagues they would be working with. I've said yes, they want personalized feedback. I don't think I think I asked a lot of people on on social media earlier this week, which jobs do you think will exist in recruitment in 10 years? And I'll go first. And I said, process automation people, tech management, branding, and exec recruiters. That's it. No other jobs need to exist in recruitment. Probably today, certainly in 10 years. So I just don't think that candidates care about talking to recruiters. I think they want personalized feedback, absolutely. They want a red carpet service, but I don't want to talk to a salesperson, ever. I don't want to go down to a car dealership and talk to a salesperson. Anybody that's a recruiter has is got a job to convince me to do something.
Aaron, I don't know whether
you would be surprised. I think you would be surprised. I have had many candidates that were not selected for whatever role I was sourcing on. And as a sourcer at my company, I don't even walk them through the remainder of the recruiting process. I only check in with them for networking purposes if for any reason they weren't selected. And a lot of times they do welcome that communication afterwards, because I have actually helped people find jobs elsewhere if they weren't a good fit for where we were at the time. And I think back, if I keep fostering relationships like this, maybe they'll tell a friend what a good experience they had with me at this company. Or maybe if the new job that they did take doesn't work out, they have someone that they can talk to. And I think that I've tried to adopt more of a mindset of not as a salesperson, but as someone that not only sources talent, but provides a service for those that connect with me as best as I possibly can with the capacity that I do, with my workload.
Sure. When I say salesperson, of course, I mean that in the broadest sense of somebody who has an objective to achieve influence with other people to get them to do something, whether that's apply for a job or something like that. So I'm not kind of being derogatory in any way about either salespeople or about anybody working in recruitment. I'm
a former car saleswoman, so you know.
Yeah. I think that if you're providing a high-touch consultancy like what you've just described, then absolutely, I can understand why people would see you as being very, very useful to them. There are not very many errands, however. There's not very many people who actually will go out of their way and have the skills and the knowledge to help candidates in those kinds of scenarios. And also, you're in an environment where there's not millions and millions of people who could work for a company like yours. So it's really, really important that they have got goodwill towards you. So I do accept that in a scenario like that, it's a slightly different thing. Yes.
Yeah. It's a very small pool of qualified individuals. So, and I think a lot of people understand that in the cleared space, that you don't want to burn bridges with recruiters and sourcers. You're going to want to have those relationships if you find yourself in the market for a new job.
I think it is sector specific as well. I mean, in Aaron's, your case where you're working, we're talking about space engineering and stuff like that. That was probably a microcosm where preservation of relationships is really quite important. However, you can imagine a more junior person, let's say graduate recruitment level, or, if you work in menial labor or you work in some type of more transactional job, where your availability may be the primary value, your availability as a candidate is the primary reason why recruiters are interested in you, then yeah, I guess so. You just want automation. And in fact, that's where sometimes some weird tools, in a I don't again mean in a derogatory way, can be effective when there's high volume. So for instance, you remember that Russian tool Robot Vera, which is like an automated text outreacher, which I loved. Everyone hated it because why would I want to respond to a text? I loved it because it was like the text is suitable for certain scenarios. If you are a person who's a construction worker, you're not on a computer looking at a screen. you're wandering around with a mobile device and you get a buzz in your mobile saying, hey, you're free to do 3 days worth of work at this time, at this number of dollars, I'm totally all over that. So I think it is industry specific. But Adam Chambers, I'll go back to you with a question. No, I want to ask you a question, Adam. I want to ask you as a candidate. From a candidate perspective, where do you think automation is okay? Where do you think automation is not okay? Where do you sit on that fence, man?
So we actually have a construction chatbot at the moment for a construction staffing agency, and it's got about 60% completion rate, which is extremely good. So whenever somebody clicks the ad, 60% of them answer 10 questions. Where I think it's okay is just in making their life easier. So they don't want to have to submit a CV because they don't have one prepared. And in giving them the option to just do it on their phone, like we're giving them the freedom and we're giving them time back in their life. Where it becomes not okay is, it's weird. It seems to be only not okay for the people who turn out to be unqualified. I'm not sure why, but it's always the people who either answer the questions wrong or don't have the necessary requirements to say, I want to speak to someone about this.
Well, on that note, it's actually a really interesting point, because basically we care about candidate feedback and we want to obviously care about candidate experience. But there may also be a point where, oh, by the way, this is record-breaking stuff, 5 people on the screen at any one time. But to finish this point, there may also be a point where the candidate expectation is unrealistic, because oftentimes you are not the most suitable candidate. And if you're one of 1,000 people who've applied to a job, can you expect concierge service each and every time? Maybe automated response is the best that can ever happen, because you're just an unsuccessful candidate amongst thousands. It would not make any sense for that employing business to interact with you one-to-one. And in fact, it would be detrimental for that business to do it, because they've got other people that they need to speak to. So to a certain degree, we also need to understand, the candidates need to understand the reality of it sometimes. Guillaume, I brought you back for this question. Where do you think automation is okay? Where is it not okay?
I think that it all depends on what you were saying. It's all about supply and demand. Okay, so you need to adjust the friction towards what the market has to offer. If you're going to have a high load of candidates, adding friction and therefore adding automation, like, I don't know, video interviews, pre-selection questions, chatbots and everything, you can do it, because that will decrease the amount of total data that comes to you, and the amount of data that comes to you will be pre-qualified, and then you can nurture that data really, and all the rest you can automate answers to. Okay, so you can give a concierge service to a smaller number of people. If you are looking for, I don't know, data scientists in Paris, for example, they don't do any frictions whatsoever. Concierge service from the start, everything, go straight, talk to the manager, don't do any automation, do just fully manual. So it's all about supply and demand, and how you can adjust that according to what the market has to offer, what your company has to offer, and what type of service you can and time you can dedicate to something. I've been working with luxury goods companies. When they advertise a marketing role, a standard marketing role, in 1 week on LinkedIn, they get 3,500 CVs on one single LinkedIn advert. What do you do as a recruiter if you have 3,500 applicants? There is nothing you can do. So what do? They add unnecessary constraints. Like, for example, let's add Swiss German. They don't really need to speak Swiss German, but let's add that so that maybe we're going to have less, because they're frightened to have too many people. And I'm telling them, no, you can do that. You can keep the normal requirements, but then add other automated processes that will qualify the right people, because the one person that you want to hire, you don't care whether they speak German or not.
That's a really interesting point, because I think excessive requirements on job adverts is often about applicant control, like controlling the volume of applicants, rather than actually. This is why you see irrational stuff sometimes, where people get annoyed to say, why do you need 10 years experience of this or that? It usually is because they're trying to raise the bar in a crude way to control applicant flow, rather than actually requiring those 10 years experience.
And on top of that, it's known that that is going to bring diversity problems. Women apply when they can do 80 to 190% of a job. Guys apply when they can do 50 to 60% of a job. Okay, so you will have a higher influx of men who say, I don't speak Swiss German, but let's give it a go.
Give it a shot.
And women would say, no, sorry, I don't speak, because they've got a bias of underestimation compared to men who have a bias of overestimation. So that is going to create problems. So don't create the problems where you don't have them. Add the friction if you can add the friction if you want to add the friction, but after in the process. And that's why automation is great.
All right, questions for all of you here. Whoever wants to answer, just answer. Is there an inbound or outbound lens to automation? Because it seems to me that if you're dealing with inbound, then automation makes more sense, because you're dealing with people who want your job, right? They're coming at you. So, okay, you can throw a bit of automation at them, process them that way. It doesn't have to be super concierge, etc. However, if you're going out and you're actually headhunting people, get the automation out of your process, because they're not going to tolerate that because you approach them.
No. You can scale stuff on the outbound. That's what I do every single day.
Okay.
You can scale things in a much better way by using scraping is automation in a way. Okay. Scraping information in different places, enriching data, uncovering people that you would not uncover, and then contacting a pool of candidates of people that you think would be great candidates, and then within your automated mailing systems, you can add a lot of fields of company names, and you can still personalize things and do it at a reasonably large scale that would still keep the quality, but will give you a good enough funnel at the top. Okay, this requires a lot of attention, because if you screw up once, it's a one thing about sourcing. Like, if you do things great, you are a great sourcer. If one person in your team screws it up, the whole team is shit. Okay, so you have to make sure that people who use that type of automation and do things at scale do it absolutely perfectly with zero errors, and that is extremely dangerous. That's why I try to not use too many robots or anything, or if I do so, there are screening paths where I stop and I say, is it perfect? Once it's perfect, yes, you can automate further, but there are steps where you have to stop and say, all right, let's look at it as a human and make sure that every single person I'm going to contact is the right one. This is why, I don't know, recruiters get contacted so often for IT architects role, because it's written, I recruit IT architects, and there is a dumb recruiter somewhere who types IT architect, I scrape everyone, send an email, got done.
Yeah, so the credibility of automated tools basically is at stake because of these errors. Mass mailing is a form of automation, isn't it? So all of us have been on the back of this. Go ahead, Erin.
Yeah. We also have to remember that when we're working with very smart people like software engineers, they are also doing their own automation to keep our messages out of their inboxes. You will find several GitHub repositories with ways that they can filter out recruiter emails. And I have come across several of them that had things like slide decks in their LinkedIn profiles that say, recruiters, read this before you reach out to me. Because sometimes they will have code words that you have to put in the subject line for it not to be filtered out. So when they're giving us the key to reach out to them, sometimes automation might miss things like that. So I think we have to remember that there's some automation on the candidate side too.
Yeah, I had the same, and that was very fun. I contacted a developer, and he had a chatbot, kind of email chatbot, that would respond and saying, thank you, recruiter, for contacting me. But before I even take a look at what you have to say, I'm interested in the salary. So if you don't disclose the salary, there is no point in going any further. What is the job exactly? And he had his own pre-screening questions for your jobs in order for him to answer to you. And I said, you know what? If that happens to more people, then I'm fine. And yeah, that was just on every email he would get from a recruiter, that would toggle straight. Can respond.
I appreciate that in a sense.
Maybe the question we should really be asking in that case is not so much like how much automation is too much for recruiters, but how much automation is too much by candidates?
Well, I think that's going to happen, isn't it? Bot-to-bot communications is the future for us, and bring it on. Ultimately, we have a problem filtering stuff anyway. It's not helped because everyone's hustling for the attention of other people. It's extremely difficult because the relevancy, no one's got a decent handle on this, and you're always going to get bad actors anyway who are prepared to go and smash through like 100 pissed off people just to get the one lead. That kind of character. So ultimately, we're all going to get an avatar dealing like a bot dealing with the first contact to do the pre-qualification before anyway we get to a human-to-human interaction. And I think that's totally fine. And in fact, I'd love to explore this. So if anybody's watching or listening to this that has some experience of a bot-to-bot interaction or has something in play, please get in touch because I want to explore that. I think it's the certain future, definitely for recruiting, because you can't expect people to handle email. I ignore email a lot of the time these days because you can't handle it. I'm sure a busier person like a software engineer would probably have a similar experience. A recruiter might also have that experience. If we're now dealing with thousands of job applicants every day, there comes a point where the communication channel that you're using is simply no longer effective because it's completely overwhelmed.
It's the same. Who still picks up a phone call when you don't know the phone number?
What kind of psychopath answers the phone anymore? Right.
Exactly.
I actually do.
I do that.
Yeah. Not many do though. Only Adams do that.
I think it could
I do it after running this through
prospect.
fast people search.
Yeah, same.
It's like, who are you, psycho? Email me first or send me a text or WhatsApp or whatever, but don't expect me to pick up on the first call or leave me a message. But we're already screening in a way.
You know what? The phone call has died like in a way that like super fast. Now people still have conversations. So before anybody comes at me to say, of course, get on the phone, you do that on the second contact maybe, or you do that after the relationship's been established. First contact call doesn't happen. Or if it does happen, it's like the person on the other end is furious at you, like literally homicidally furious. Don't even try it. It's pointless. So I don't know, correct if I'm wrong, folks. I mean, do you make a cold call? Do you take a cold call? I mean, am I just an outlier here? I have no idea. I'm pretty certain I haven't answered a phone call that I've an unrecognized number for at least 3 or 4 years. Like,
well, I don't make them, but I do answer them. And I think Adam just said, like, that could be a customer phoning me. It could be somebody phoning me with an opportunity.
No, it ain't.
That's why I answer them. No, it almost never is. And that's why
almost never.
I hear the slight delay and then a click and then some canned message. I'm like, fuck. What's never done that in the first place?
I actually test drive the product called Connect and Sell, which automates a lot of the cold calling process. So they have people who would do all the initial parts until you're actually on the phone.
Yeah.
That actually worked immensely well. And I don't know if it's like the automation is, there's so many levels of it now, isn't there?
Well, I posted on, there's a link, the Facebook group that I posted on All About Recruitment Technology. And a few weeks ago, just for a joke, I posted, can anybody recommend a candidate dialer system? Right? Thinking everyone's going to crack up laughing at this concept. And what happened? A bunch of people, oh, this one's quite good, this one's quite good. And I'm like, what? That exists? Crazy, like call center style dialer system.
I reckon that's US, man. I think the US, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but the US is generally still quite cold call-y, and they're quite, happy to do that. Whereas I think in Europe, Jeff, definitely that's just gone. I mean, it was always more difficult to do, but generally, even the UK is gone now. I mean, picking up the phone, dialing 9. I mean, you could do that all day. You will not succeed as a salesperson or as a recruiter if that is what you're doing. Obviously, caveat depending on what you're selling, what you're recruiting. But if you're selling into white collar or you're recruiting into white collar, I don't think anybody's picking up your call.
Yeah, for me in Switzerland, I can tell you that the normal phone, if it's not planned, is just like my snail mail box. I only get bad news. Like the only thing I get from snail mail are just invoices. I never get a good news from my snail mail. And my phone and phone is kind of the same. If somebody calls me and it's unexpected, it's rarely a good news.
I want to finish on one thing, everybody. You talk about UX here, Guillaume, but it's a very valid point because the UX of the letterbox has long since stopped being joyous. You know it's just flyer crap. It's BS. You hate this because it's a bill, it's the tax man, it's somebody giving you something you don't want. Horrible. Phone call is the same way. The UX of the phone call that's called, you know it's not good news. It's going to be someone hustling you. Is the email going to get into that point also where you get a horror at looking at your inbox because you know what? Overwhelmingly, it's stuff that you don't want. It's bad news or no news. It's just going to waste your time or it's going to hurt you in some way. Anyway, folks, I think that's about it for today. Thank you so much for everybody for joining the show. Thank you to our guests, Adam Chambers, Guillaume Alexandra, random guest, Adam Gordon. And obviously, you got nothing to do on Friday afternoons, man. And of course, co-host Erin Matthew. Thank you so much for joining the show. Everybody, thank you for paying attention. For the hour that we've got. We are back next week as we are every week on Friday. We're talking about how to become an indispensable recruitment partner, folks. Particularly interesting for recruitment business owners, by the way, because we've got Neil Carberry, who's the CEO of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, joining us for that. He's a super smart guy in charge of an industry body that I think runs tens of thousands of recruitment agencies in the UK. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. Please make sure you join us for that. Thank you again to our sponsors, Workable. If you want an ATS, check out Workable. Other than that, enjoy the weekend, folks. We will see you next week.
Bye.